very early on, I had a school. We had a dinner at school, and the guest speaker was a guy called Frederick Forsyth. He was a famous author at the time. He'd written a book called Day of the Jackal, another one called The Odessa Files. He was kind of like the Dan Brown of his generation. And the other guy, the boy sitting on the other side of him was really boring, and he didn't want to talk to him. So he just basically talked to me for 2 hours. It was just one of those great moments you have. And at the end, he said, make sure you always listen. It doesn't matter who you're talking to, always listen, because you never know where the next great idea comes from, where the next opportunity comes from. And that's very much been the way of my life. Hi, it's Matt Preston, and I'm on Legends with Bevo.
This is Legends with Bevo, thanks to Bet Odyssey, Renelec Electrical Services, and Anytime Fitness Glenelg. And now, here's your host, Bevo.
The one and only Matt Preston, great to have you on Legends with Bevo for a chat. Now, you're the best-selling author of 7 cookbooks. Hopefully it's soon to be the 8th with your new book, The World of Flavour. How are you going over there in Melbourne? And tell us about the book.
It's a little bit grey, which is annoying, because I thought today was going to be the afternoon for doing nothing. So I worked my tush off yesterday, and now I'm sitting here going, I can't sit out in the sun and have a cup of tea. But other than that, it's good. I mean, after 250 days of lockdown, any ability to get out is fantastic. And we're still a bit nervous down here, I think. I went out the other day, went out to a rooftop bar in the city, which is fantastic. 28 of my closest friends. And it was just really lovely to be able to stand in somewhere that's really familiar, look around and see all these people you know. And you go, where am I going to go next? But it's a bit like a kid in the candy store. No, should I go and talk over there? Should I go there? What are I going to do? So, yeah, very quickly got over that what am I going to say, which I think was the nervousness of a lot of people who'd done not a lot other than, crochet earpod covers and make sourdough for 250 days. It was like, we had to find a whole new selection of conversation to have.
And plenty of Zooms, I can imagine, as well, no doubt.
Oh, endless bloody Zooms. Yeah, no, and still continuing. I mean, I hate you see, look at where you are. Your studio looks great. You got the big screen up there. You made an effort. I hate this kind of, this thing with Zoom. It started off and people were all excited and, sales of male makeup boomed in the USA. People started to acknowledge that maybe they needed a bit of a ring light that would make everything look better. And then no one actually bought the ring light for $17 from Kmart. And then people started to do those terrible, bland backgrounds. And part of the joy about a Zoom was being able to look in the background and go, what's that? Is that a guitar in the background? What's going on there? And, what are the disco lights? Or what are they reading at the moment? Or really, they've still got that book on the shelves. I mean, I used to, that's a great joy. And I think it also changes the way you have meetings, doesn't it? Zoom became all about say one, get in, get out, say one thing. Then the rest of the time was just listen. It's not the meetings I love, where you kind of everyone has a fair rant and you get that lovely kind of conversations that kind of circulate and kind of the ideas kind of whirlwind up into something quite spectacular.
Now we better move on to our very first segment. Matt, this one's called Big Failures and What You've Learnt. Do you remember the first big fail you experienced? How did that make you feel? And how did you get past those failures, Matt?
I mean, it's weird in terms of failures. Things like losing footy matches didn't really register. I think the first really big fail I have, and which is specifically food related, was I thought it'd be really clever to have everyone for dinner, and I'd dye the mashed potato blue, and I'd put lots of red food coloring in the baked beans, and I'd try and make it a really bright coloured dish. And even though it didn't change the flavour at all, people just went, nothing got eaten. No one ate the mashed potato. No one ate the beans. And that was one of those moments where you go, oh, that's a bit disappointing. I've blown my weekly budget for my weekly student budget on this meal, and I've just balls it up totally. I think in terms of the other one, very, very early on, I was shortlisted to present a TV show in the UK called 01 for London. And I got down to the last 3 or 4 people to present it. It was really exciting. And I went into the studio. I was chronically underprepared. I had to do a film review. I sat there. There was a little monitor in the corner of the room, like a tiny version of what you got now. And I remember that I started and I couldn't get a word out. It was awful. There's a very famous movie called Broadcast News or Network, one of those two where Albert Brooks gets to fill in for the nighttime news new broadcast, and it all goes horribly wrong, and he can't remember what he's saying. He mumbles his words, and he starts sweating. And I could see myself. I could see the monitor in the corner of my eye. I could see myself corpsing. I could see myself getting worse and worse. And the producer who was working with me, filming this for the interview, was being nicer and nicer because he could see I was totally wrong. And it was just that moment you just want to throw your hands up and go no. There was a little bit of kind of reassurance when the person who beat me for the interview was Mike Myers, who went on to create Austin Powers. So I kind of, even though I knew that I was never going to get it anyway, it was still that moment of I don't ever want to be in that situation of being so totally unprepared that I'm gonna not be able to answer the question, not be able to deliver. So I historically I'm awfully over prepared for stuff. I try and make the effort to, which is not very, I'm not. I can fly by the seat of my pants, but I'm much better doing that, knowing that I've got a ground bed of research and knowledge underneath me.
It's a great way to be, for sure. Now this next segment, Matt, is called "When the Going Gets Tough, the Tough Gets Winning." What was the first big success you ever felt? Like back when you were a kid, say, do you think that set you on a path as well as a professional food critic?
I won 50 cents. I won 50 cents for taking out the Hood History Prize at school. I wrote something about submarines, which I think was probably largely stolen from one of my dad's books on submarines. And I won the Hood History Prize, and it was very exciting. And even though the 50 cents was, even back then, the 50 cents was nothing, it still felt very good. It still felt very, very good. So I think that's probably the first, I think. I think that's probably the first that registered. And I can remember, the other stuff I'd won. I remember the walking up and winning it, but I don't remember any emotion afterwards. But that one, it was like, yes. So that may well have had an impact now when I come to, not just writing a recipe book, but also including the history of dishes and some food history in there. I'm thinking of the Hood History Prize from 44 years ago, 43 years ago.
And do you think that sort of set you on the path as well of becoming a food critic and a judge on Masterchef for 10 years?
No, not at all. No, I think that's what's so funny about life. And that, I was very early on. I had we had a dinner at school, and the guest speaker was a guy called Frederick Forsyth. He was a famous author at the time. He'd written a book called Day of the Jackal, another one called The Odessa Files. He was kind of like the Dan Brown of his generation. And the other guy, the boy sitting on the other side of him, was really boring, and he didn't want to talk to him. So he just basically talked to me for 2 hours. It was just one of those great moments you have. And at the end, he said, make sure you always listen. It doesn't matter who you're talking to, always listen, because you never know where the next great idea comes from, the next opportunity comes from. And that's very much been the way of my life, I started as a food writer because a friend who's starting a new magazine needed someone to write about food and knew I cooked a bit, and just rang and asked me, gave me that opportunity. It's a true Cinderella moment. When it came to Masterchef, I was rung for advice on who to cast by the daughter of a friend of my mum's. This is how tangential it was. They were just looking for the Masterchef really was going to be two chefs and a host, and I gave the time, listened to this woman, asking me, basically plundering my information, using me as an unpaid research tool, because I've worked for the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival for a few years, so I've done a lot of demos with chefs. And then halfway through the conversation, about 40 minutes in, she asked for a photo, and the photo went from her to the producer to the head guy at 10, and they wrote another role for me in the show. So suddenly there were 3 judges, not 2. So again, that thing of, what's that great line? Listen, because opportunity knocks quietly.
I love that, and I'm a bit the same as yourself. I'm being actually told I'm a really good listener, and I suppose you sort of have to be good at doing interviews as well, Matt, and so that's really good advice. Now we'll move on to the next segment. This one's called Now I'm in the Big Time. Now looking back now, when you first started out as a chef, what was it like, and what was your fondest memory as a chef?
Well, I think that's the whole thing, is that I'm not a chef. I'm a food writer. I'm a keen home cook. That's where that's where I come from. That's my difference, and I think it's probably the difference in the tone of my cookbooks is I'm sitting there thinking about things like who's going to do the washing up and how many pots we're going to use and can we make this quicker and and can we get the chefs are involved in maximum effort for maximum flavor, and I'm involved. My whole motto is taken from Antonio Coluccio, the moff, which is a minimum fuss, maximum flavor. So I think that's a big difference between a home cook and a chef. I've cooked a lot. I've written a lot of recipes, writing recipes for over 20 years. I think the third recipe feature I won the big Australian recipe writing award. So I've had some good success with writing recipes, and I love it. But as a cook, it came upon me. Like I said, someone said, you want to review restaurants, and then from that I started writing for The Age, and then someone said I wanted to do I've been baking some biscuits and took someone to the office for a meeting. They said, do you want to write a feature on biscuits? So I wrote a cover feature on biscuits, then wrote one on jam. That won the award. So, I think often same thing, you listen and you listen, you're enthusiastic, and things often tend to open up for you then. So I think that's, so in terms of the early thinking is all around food. When I went from being just a enthusiastic home cook and eater to doing it, doing it in the paper. It's the terror. It's the terror of what if the recipe doesn't work? The terror of what if I say something about a restaurant that no one agrees with, and I had a bad experience. So again, that comes down to that idea of you always want to go back if it's surprisingly good or surprisingly bad. You always want to make sure that your recipes are properly tested. Too many recipes out there aren't properly tested. That's the curse of so much stuff online that doesn't come from a respected source. Like I write for Delicious and for Taste, and those recipes are all triple tested. I know that if someone makes it, it's gonna you may make it and not like the flavor because it's got dill in it or it's got coriander in it, but what you're being promised is what you're going to get. So I think that those things quickly you learn that stuff's really important. The other thing I learned very quickly when I started writing for The Age, no one in the paper had their email address at the end of their articles, and I argued unsuccessfully at first, but maybe after about 6 months I persuaded them to allow me to put my email address in, so that people, if they found and they had a favorite local restaurant, and Australians are so passionate about food, they eat out a lot, that they could tell me about their local place, and maybe I could take it in, and that suddenly changed. You tend to find critics move in a very small circle of the same 50 restaurants. They all review the same places, which doesn't really move things forward. I mean, social media, internet's hopefully changed that. Hopefully now you get someone who's obsessed with Palmer's just writing about Palmer's in Melbourne or Palmer's in Sydney, or someone who's just obsessed with stir fry or burgers, or you get these kind of specialists who can give you some extra insight. But having an email address allowed me to discover a lot of places, and they might have been a Chinese restaurant in some outer suburb that no reviewer had ever been to, and they'd been there 17 years, and it was just delicious. And so I think that was a big learning about whether you're listening to data or whether you're talking to people. That stuff, again, it's so valuable. It goes back to that Frederick Forsyth thing. You never know where the next great idea comes from or where the next great recipe comes from. So talking about food is a great joy and a great inspiration the whole time.
Can agree with you on that one for sure. Now, the next segment, this one's called Starstruck Celebrities, one of my favourites, Matt. Now,
yes, my gosh.
There's no doubt you've met some very famous people over the years. Who was the most famous person you met, though, and why? And tell us about the story of that meeting.
I must have been 9, and I got to meet Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon.
Oh.
And I have a. So you can imagine being a 9-year-old, and meeting the first man on the moon was like almost too big to contemplate. Almost too big to kind of to take in. But I've still got the photo. I've still got the photo of me and my cousin, whose foot I was standing on when the photo was taken, because he's in the back there going, shaking hands with Neil Armstrong, which is that's. I think it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to top that. I know most people, I suppose, as a journalist, you get to interview loads of people, and you get very quickly, again, same thing. If you've done your research and you know some stuff about them that most people never ask them about, you automatically kind of you earn a little bit of closeness that probably otherwise you wouldn't have, and that's important in terms of getting to tell you stuff. In nowadays, the people I kind of get freaked out about meeting, I've had lots of mates in the music industry. I met lots of people in that space. Food less so. I still get a little bit freaked out meeting some of those sporting legends.
Looking back at your career on television, and also as a food critic and an author, there's not much you haven't done. What have been some of the highs and lows of your career, and sort of do you have any regrets at all?
Regrets, I have a few. Highs and lows. Oh, look, I think the highs are the obvious ones, and some of the unobvious ones. Obviously, the crazy success of Masterchef season 1 and 2 was totally unheralded and surprising. The idea of how being able to go and launch a book in Portugal and everyone know who you are in a country on the other side of the world is really strange and very humbling and also lots of fun, because people come up to you and say, you got to go to this restaurant. I'm a fisherman. All my best fish goes to this one chef. It's really good, and you go and it's really good. That's the kind of the upside. I think the scary stuff. I've always taken an attitude. I've always taken an attitude with TV that it's not what I do. Like what I do, I'm a food writer, a food and recipe writer. That's my job. I've been writing for Delicious for 20 years. It's what I love. It's my happy place. It's the thing I just adore, going down those rabbit holes, coming up with ideas. I still get buzz coming at the end of it because we've come up with a column idea that we both think is really funny. We're both laughing about it the next day. So in a way, when things happen, like we had season 5 of Masterchef, which wasn't really, we felt wasn't really a show that we were that proud of, that we didn't, the cooking wasn't good enough, and it sort of lost its way a bit for a year. And the ratings suffered accordingly. And you get that sense of slipping out the back door, which I think is for lots of TV people. We all have a limited shelf life, and there's there's a terror for lots of people that it's going to be it. That's going to be it. But for me, it's always been the sense with TV is that I get to go back to doing what I love, and that's the food writing. And if anything, and again, travel as well. Write about travel. So I haven't, not just through COVID, but before that, I haven't really done the 3 big international trips I would have done. I've not, I used to go to Istanbul, Seoul, and Buenos Aires in the same year to do food stories. That's it's hard to eclipse that as a job. It's really the dream job. I think in terms of the other stuff, the other failure stuff, I kind of think you feel depressed about it, and then you go, well, what can I learn from it? I like that. I do a bit of radio now, and I had a great interview with a philosopher who's big into stoicism. And then the first question you said you should ask yourself about failure is, how can I impact? Is this in my control? If it's in your control, then you can change. If it's not in your control, then don't stress about it. If you decide to put out a video on TikTok and no one cares and no one watches it, that's all right. You move on. You do the next thing. It's a bit like playing golf. The hardest thing with golf is forgetting about the last terrible shot you made and moving on, because at the end of the day, that's the only way you're gonna improve. So, other abject failures, I'm trying to think. I've been very lucky, I think. Maybe that's just because people set their expectations very low with me. In terms of regrets, I'll do those very quickly. Not buying a 1964 Ford Galaxy convertible, bright pink, white bench seats from my friend Matt, we wanted to sell it for £500. That was a huge mistake. Not buying a John Kelly painting when I went up to the Benalla Biennale. John Kelly paints these amazing paintings of cows, of papier-mâché cows that were put on the runways in the Second World War up in Darwin to make spotter planes from the Japanese Air Force think that they were fields and not airfields. I love his paintings. And the other one was walking past a giant 60 by 40 painting of the Madonna and Child done by an Indigenous artist called Robert Campbell Jr. that was available for Like it was quite expensive, £1,500. But I loved it. I walked past it. Don't think I walked past it once. I walked back past it again, and at that point I should have gone straight back home and said to my folks, I need $1,500. There's something I have to get but they're my regrets. Everything else is pretty, It's a weird thing. Whatever job you do, it's jobs and partners. I've always found that when you re-partner, your new partners invariably you enjoy your life with them better than you did with your previous partner. That may be because you've improved as a human being, but I'm a big believer in you move forward rather than backwards.
No, I like that. Great advice as well. And this segment is called Weird But True. As part of your new book, Matt Preston's The World of Flavour, you've got a recipe, and I heard this the other day doing a bit of research and listening and watching some TV as well, Matt. You've got a recipe for making soft serve ice cream with chickpea water. Tell us more about that.
Well, that is you've hit on in terms of things I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of that idea of being able to put frozen fruit into a blender and then put in an egg white and turn it into instant ice cream. That was really that's one of my few original ideas I've come up with, truly original ideas. People used to put fruit in a blender and then blend it and freeze it. And by using frozen fruit, it happens instantly. But the problem is that everyone's got a bit concerned about raw eggs now. And again, this is that lovely thing about listening to people and being open to stuff. I got a text sent to me by a woman in Calgary who watched Masterchef in Calgary and was following me on Instagram and was following my lockdown kitchen site on Instagram. And she said, have you ever thought of making your instant mayonnaise, but using chickpea water? This is how I do it, and it works really well. I've had work with chickpea water before. That's the liquid when you cook chickpeas, or that ends up in the tin of chickpeas. And I tried to make meringues, and they were a disaster, but I followed a recipe, and it was an amazing success. It was actually nicer, I think, than the raw egg one. And then recently I'm sitting there going, I'm going to make a video for TikTok. I want to make the instant ice cream. I wonder if the chickpea water works. And if you listen to the video, you can hear in my voice this kind of overexcited. I'm like, it's coming together. It's actually doing it. It's doing it. And again, you then, it's a blender, 300 grams of raspberries, 4 tablespoons of the juice from chickpea. Raspberries has got a good strong flavor, so you lose any chickpea flavor, and a little bit of sugar if you need it, or honey to sweeten it. And you literally just press go on the blender, and you blend up the frozen fruit. You then throw in the chickpea water, and it'll just aerate. And it'll start looking pale pink, go from dark pink to pale pink, and it'll double in volume as it incorporates air. And suddenly you've got this beautiful soft serve that you can have. And you can do it with any fruit, You do it with strawberries, you can do it with blackberries, you can do it with mango. I love those cheap, hacky recipes that are a bit of fun.
That's magnificent. And obviously you've been around the food world for a number of years, as we spoke about. What's on the topic of unusual foods, though? What are some of the most surprising or strangest foods that you've actually experienced, Matt? You might have tasted or cooked and gone, wow, that's actually tastes a lot better than what I thought. Along the same lines as the chickpea water soft serve ice cream.
It's a really good question. I think livers are always one of those things. They look so weird and slimy and like blood red, and they're delicious when they're pan fried. I think sometimes, I always remember I was reviewing a Chinese restaurant and there were 2 desserts on the menu, and one was for a ginkgo bean soup, and the other was for a soup made with snow frog ovaries. The ovaries from a snow frog, like in Hong Kong or somewhere. And so I ordered them both, and the ginkgo nut soup is disgusting. And bizarrely, the frog ovary soup tastes like, instead of the ovaries taste a bit like sponge cake. And I was like, oh, this is really good. This is really good stuff. Often that's not the case. Often when you have a pig's lung soup or something like that in Hong Kong, or you luck out and have, you're in a restaurant and you have a set menu and they bring out, if the Japanese restaurant on the sashimi plate, there's a bit of whale, and you then feel you got to try it. And you try it because it's there and it's otherwise going to get thrown away. And you go, that's very underwhelming. I don't understand. There's no great flavor win there. And I think that's the thing. I'm happy to take the moral consequences of eating pork, because pig is totally delicious. But if things are not totally delicious, if I can get the same deliciousness out of a vegetable, then I'd rather go the vegetable.
No, I think you're. I can certainly agree with you on that one. There's some beautiful vegetarian meals out there as well, even though I am a meat eater. But I am trying to eat a bit more vegetarian. I guess because my wife doesn't eat much meat as well. You tend to change your patterns a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, I think financially it's had an impact. I think people are just wanting to eat. I think we're also understanding that vegetables are not just the boiled things on the side. That the old idea, I used to joke that growing up in an Anglo-Celtic household, vegetables were roasted on Sunday and overboiled in the other six days of the week. And there's so much we can do with them: steam them and fry them, and puree them. They're an endless world of pleasure.
Well, last night I actually made just a basic oven roasted veggies with some herbs and lemon and a few other bits and pieces. It was absolutely delicious, and it's just so easy.
Beba, you're writing recipes. I love it. And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's, that's the magic of cooking. Time and heat can change things beyond recognition, and that's that kind of crazy chemistry, transformation, metamorphosis stuff that makes it so much fun. Makes food so much fun, and it's a science, it's a chemistry experiment at home that you can eat. I love that.
Well, Matt Preston, the book is called The World of Flavour. It's your 8th book. Hopefully, as I spoke before, it's going to be a bestseller like your other 7. Can't wait to have a read. And before you go, tell us how we can purchase this great book.
Oh, you can go to any bookshop, or you can go to any bookseller online, and you'll be able to find it. If you're watching Bevo's show, of course, overseas. There's a great site called the Book Depository that will ship it for free around the world. So if you want to buy it for your mum back in the UK or your girlfriend back in Canada, that's the way to go with that. But yeah, you should be able to find it stacked up high in anywhere you go and going to find good books.
Wonderful. Well, speaking of wonderful, Matt Preston, it's always a pleasure to chat with you and look forward to speaking again in the future. Well done on the book, and well done on everything else you've done in your career so far.
Lovely chatting to you, Bevo. Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye-bye.